So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild.
Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
So Walter received the Balfour Declaration, and I have a copy here. And I wonder if I could possibly ask you to read it for us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I'm going to put on my spectacles to make sure I read it accurately. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment of Palestine as a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur Balfour.
And here it is, the Balfour Declaration. What do you feel when you see it here?
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people. If you think it took 3,000 years to get to this. And then you say, how did this miracle happen? And it's the most incredible piece of opportunism. I mean, if you think you had an impoverished would-be scientist, Chaim Weizmann, who somehow gets to England, meets a few people, including members of my family, seduces them. He has such great charm and conviction. He gets to Balfour, and he unbelievably persuades Balfour and Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and most of the ministers, that this idea of the national home for Jews should be allowed to take place. I mean, it's so unlikely. And then he starts to fight a difficult battle with the British cabinet, and this letter goes through 5 drafts, as you know. And in the end, it comes out as a rather compromising letter. I mean, the essential point is there for the Jewish community to fasten on to. You have the first bit, which promises a national home rather than the national home, and then you have the bit that nothing that's to be done should in any way harm the Arab community. But you come back to the big point, which is that this is perhaps the greatest event in Jewish life for thousands of years. And it's a miracle that it took place.
Just tell us a little bit more about Walter, the second Lord Rothschild, because he was an unusual and colourful character.
He was a deeply eccentric man. But from a very early age, his passion was collecting.
His niece was sent to him and stuffed them away into wicker baskets. And it does make you wonder what would have happened if the Balfour Declaration, the letter, had been...
A deep interest in what was happening about the possibility of Balfour Declaration. So maybe those letters would have got to the top of his file.
So this is your cousin Dorothy, Dolly?
Yep, Mrs. James de Rothschild.
Can you say a little bit about
her?
Well,
she married my cousin Jimmy when she was 17.
She was a major supporter of Israel, wasn't she?
Major supporter. I mean, she worshipped her husband, who'd been deeply committed, son of Baron Edmore. It was due to him, I think, that she became interested. But once she became interested, she became passionately interested. After his death, she became even more committed. She just wanted to carry out his wishes and what he cared deeply about. And then she had her own personality, a deeply good human being who was quite unselfish. She devoted herself to this place, to Israel, and to a few friends, and had a wonderful life. And you can read letters from her to Weizmann and from Weizmann to her when she was only 17. And what she did, which was crucially important, was to connect up Weizmann with the British establishment.
I think she also trained him in how to deal. She helped educate him how to
and it's
conduct himself.
At that age, but she did tell Weizmann, how to kind of integrate, how to insert himself into British establishment life, which he learned very quickly.
And we're sitting here at the 100th anniversary of this significant letter. If I can just ask you to think about the next centennial, 100 years' time, and just maybe share some of your hopes, your aspirations about where Israel will be.
What does one hope for? One, of course, hopes for a peaceful relationship with Israel's neighbours, and that's going to be the most difficult matter of all to achieve. But even now you can see, with the disarray in the Middle East and the importance of relationships that Israel is developing, not only with Jordan, but also with Egypt and indeed with Saudi Arabia, even if they're not publicised because of the Sunni-Shiite war, there's hope. And I think if you take the need of Arab nations to have intelligence help, and if on the other hand you take compassion and generosity coming from Israel to Palestinian territories and its less fortunate neighbours, there are grounds for optimism. And I am an optimist.
Lord Rothschild, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. As you know, but not everyone in this audience knows, our relationship, in a sense, goes back 40 years or so. For my father asked you if you would write a book, Two Rothschilds in the Land of Israel. Was it your first book or your second book? Second book. It tells the story of Baron Edmond de Rothschild and his son James's profound interest and involvement with Palestine and then the State of Israel. And he helped persecuted Russian Jews at the time of the Russian pogroms in the 1880s to settle in Palestine. James continued his work and lived in England following the horror of the Dreyfus case in Paris and his marriage to an English girl of 17, as you were hearing earlier at the time, my late cousin Dorothy. Both of them played a prominent role in the events leading up to the Declaration. Towards the end of his life, my cousin James, Jimmy as he was known, donated the Knesset to the State of Israel, and his wife Dorothy, we called her Dolly, continued his work through the foundation Yad Hanadiv, in Hebrew, the benefactor, and it was her idea for our foundation to support the building of the Supreme Court. She entrusted me with the chairmanship of the foundation, which today employs some 40 people in Jerusalem and supports a wide range of activities, including education, technology, environmental issues, and facilitating employment for Arab communities. We're currently engaged in the building of Israel's new National Library in Jerusalem for the people of the book and all faiths. And for the first time, thanks to the technological revolution we're going through, the library will be able to link up its vast and rich collections to peoples of all nationalities and denominations throughout the world. The new building should open its doors to the public in its newly created form on a wonderful island site looking towards the Knesset and the Israel Museum in about 4 years' time. Can I add a few words to the ones you heard earlier about why the Balfour Declaration was addressed to the second Lord Rothschild? His father was the first Lord Rothschild, and he was the first Jew to be admitted to the House of Lords. And through his contacts, he opened the gates of Whitehall for Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, and whose book, The Jewish State, as many of you will know, was published in 1896. His eldest son, Walter Rothschild, was a deeply eccentric individual, and his passion was to create the finest private collection of natural history specimens ever made by one man at his museum in Tring. Then one day, very surprisingly, through his Hungarian sister-in-law, Rezika, who was married to my grandfather, he met Chaim Weizmann, who converted him to Zionism, and he was soon seen as the lay leader of the Jewish community, which was why the Declaration was addressed to him. Our family has therefore been involved with Palestine and Israel for nearly 150 years.